It's that eerie feeling that you can't escape. Everything looks normal, but something feels off. You can't put your finger on it, and your friends are trying to calm your nerves, but their words ring hollow since fear and unevenness is chiseled into their faces. There's no sound, yet you're all drowning in a suffocating silence. Wherever this pressure is coming from, or from what or whomever, then it's getting closer. There's nowhere to hide, yet the thing stays hidden. Suddenly your instincts are telling you to look up. You're desperately trying to locate what shouldn't find you. And then you and your friends see it. A quick shadow encapsulates the sky in an instant, and then it's gone. The shadow of something ancient, yet primal. A prideful being that keeps everything else beneath it, waiting to ensure a sudden and brutal ending to whatever finds itself being led by causality to the wrong place. And you just hope it isn't you. I hadn't read Berserk since the last video I did on it almost 3 years ago, so things were a little vague and I feared it would take some time for the world to grab me again. Then it all opened up with the scene that I just did an abridged version of, and I was instantly brought back to Midland. I just stared at these 2 pages for a couple of minutes. What an opening, and what a start for me reading Berserk for the first time. The other half. Now, unlike last time where I just stood here and rambled for 20 minutes and somehow managed to cover 7 volumes of the Berserk Deluxe editions, then this time I'm gonna go by script because there is a lot to cover and I don't want to keep you here for too long. So let's begin. This video covers the last 7 of the Deluxe editions, so volume 8 until volume 14, or 22 until volume 41 in the singles. That is the Millenium Falcon arc and the first half of the Fantasia arc. And I want to get the most boring aspect out of the way first, which is the art. Last time I talked about how the art started out fine and then became great later on. Well, here we start at epic and land on great, but a tad worse. Let me explain. As you saw in the opening, the art comes out swinging with both details, proportions, lighting and composition. It feels both grandiose and larger than life, as well as grounded, dirty and ugly. It's this weird balance which combines the best aspect of the Golden Age and Conviction arc. Now, something I mentioned in the last video was action paneling and choreography of Guts' fights were on the boring side. It was just him spamming big swings and then using superior strength to defeat legions of enemies. Well, Miura must have had future vision and saw me saying that and then decided to do some payback. Because the confrontation between Guts and Such on the Hills of Swords, holy shit! The fluidity strategies used by Guts to compensate for the difference in strength, the movements and the page layouts showed that Miura can indeed do action well. I was floored with the showcase here, and luckily the fights going forward is more in this vein than in the former 7 volumes. The battles might be less grim, but this new approach leaves them much more tense. From then on, the art improves a lot, if you can believe that. And it walks this line of making the characters and the environment more beautiful, yet highlighting the ugliness and terror at the same time. The world explodes around Guts and Kaska, and you start to feel that it is much vaster than earlier hinted at. And to hammer this home, Miura uses his art to effectively set a mood. And just like the opening with the forest, it's a mood you can taste, and it tugs at a memory long forgotten that gives you shivers and you feel the presence of the environment. It's something familiar, yet a completely unknown terror. And then there is architecture, your favorite subject in your dark fantasy manga. I swear, Miura had a psychic as an architect because some of these architecture drawings are just cel-shaded photographies. How can anyone on such a small canvas place so many lines that precisely? You would have some tense drama or lore dumps going on, and I would stop dead in my tracks and just look at architecture. Guts might be ready to take some monsters or men and divide them by 2 on the next page, but I'll have to spend the next 5 minutes looking at buildings because goddamn, Just look at them. And it's not just buildings. My man draws ships as well. And you can bet your ass we will spend the time appreciating these boats, because he took his time to draw every single plank and beam that made up those ships, and you will look and appreciate every single one of them. It's nuts how easy it makes it looks. And we're just getting started. This is just warm up. You think that I have shown you the peak of Berserk's art yet? You think this is all the Miura has to offer? Not even close. My man got good at drawing big battles during the Golden Age arc, and sure, they look good, but trust me, that was only just the training arc for what's to come. This man pulled up his sleeve and then drew a battle between the Kushan and the Britannian army with Griffith and his men, and it made the battle at Minas Tirith look like a kindergarten argument. The sheer scale of it is criminal. And again, this is not Miura flexing. No, this is still warm-up. How can you look at this and say it's warm-up? Don't worry, we will get to it. You see, it's not just details that make the art in this portion of the story look so good. It's the line placement. The utter precision in their placement is inhumane. No waver or hint of uncertainty. Miura doesn't just find the best way to draw a panel or figure out how much detail should be kept and what should be undrawn. No, he's just an ecologist that managed to dig up and reveal that distant placement. It's hard to describe, but looking at these panels and how the lines are placed, it just looks right and truthful. There was only one correct way to draw this image, and somehow Miura found it. Which only makes it more of a joy how he then decides to treat us with a myriad of double spreads. And they look gorgeous in the deluxe editions. My memory might not be correct, but I seem to remember fewer spreads in the first half. The only downside, if you can call it that, is the reading time is doubled. Because you have to, by law, spend 5 minutes on each double spread taking it in. And the sheer difference between them, establishing shots, character pieces, action, setup, payoff. This! And you would think that looking at this piece that this is as good as it gets. Close, but we are not there yet. You see, at the end of the Falconia arc, the astral plane merges with the real world. The astral what? Don't worry about it. I'm gonna get back to it briefly later on in the video. However, this event happens, and what follows is almost 4 chapters straight with minimal to no dialogue and just Miura flexing on all of us. I'm only showing a glimpse of it, but even this should be enough to get my point across. This man can draw the most epic dragon scenes out there, and yet this one image of a brain brings the most hype, terror and inciting fear in all of fiction. I don't need to say anything more than it's from Berserk, and everyone knows what it represents. A goddamn brain close-up and everyone screams void, and rightly so. My jaw was sitting comfortably on the floor during those 4 chapters. Now, the peak of Berserk's art, and in my opinion the best panel of the art in the whole manga, was what started this sequence. This fucking double spread has so much hype, meaning, gravity, history, symbolism and more packed into it. And more than that, it is, in my opinion, pure perfection. And regarding Berserk, that says a lot. So after jacking Miura off for the past few minutes, let's tackle the other part of my original statement. How does it go downhill from here? Did he break his hand? Start drawing with his feet? How did we go from that to just okay? One word. Digital. During the Fantasia arc, Miura switched from physical to digital art. And it shows. The art starts out by being a lot simpler. Fewer and bolder lines and simplistic layout, which is jarring compared to the end of the Falconia arc. It's not bad per se, but this is Berserk. And comparing it to itself, this is a huge downgrade. Luckily, Miura does become better at using this new tool, but he has issues staying on model now. Guts suddenly looks like an angsty teenager again, compared to the 40-year-old coal miner who is a heavy drinker and smokes 6-pack each day look of the former arc. He looks gentle, yet hasn't earned that yet. But it doesn't stop there. Once he gets comfortable with the technology, he discovers this one thing that is possible when drawing digital: the ability to zoom. So now, instead of having to downgrade the quality of the drawing for the background characters because you can only draw clearly on something that small, you can just zoom and draw it like it's a full-size panel. That makes everything look fantastic, right? No. It makes everything flat and is distracting, especially because part of the panel is close and has boat lines with details spaced out, while background characters have the exact same amount of detail but in a way more cramped space. The whole thing becomes messy and incoherent. Having background characters and things that are far away in less details gives it the look of things being out of focus because they are too far away to be captured properly. This worked amazingly when the manga was drawn physically, but is gone now, at least for the most part. There are moments where the digital art stands out and the strength of the tool becomes clear. You get a glimpse of the bold dark strokes from the Black Swordsman in the Dreamscape, or fantastic double spread with well balanced details of Griffith and his men. I just wonder what we would have gotten if Miura had a chance to make 100 chapters more in digital. I have more points on the art, but Berserk is more to offer than just looking pretty, if you can call Berserk that. For example, believe it or not, but there's an actual story in here. I know! Shocker! After the Conviction arc, which in my opinion has the best build-up and climax of any arc up until that point, we left off with Griffith reincarnating and ready to make his kingdom. So where do we go from here? Well, Miura takes a step back and I appreciate the next story beats. After Guts finally gets Kaska back, his mission now becomes get her to a safe place, hopefully permanently. And we spend a lot of time with them, and especially how Guts pushes himself to keep her safe. And this just after his reunion on the Hills of Swords. And my god, does Miura still know how to do foreshadowing. What happens there won't come to fruition until, well, we'll get to that later. We more or less spent the first half of the story with Guts going solo, if you don't count the Golden Age arc, or the later half of the Conviction arc. My point doesn't seem to work here. Anyway, it would have been such a slap to the face if we were just to leave Kaska and go back to revenge. But we quickly see that taking care of Kaska and fighting demons each night is just too much for him. So Miura does this thing to make Guts accepting of others more natural. And it should be considered cheating for how effortlessly he does it. Just how he makes Guts so exhausted that the Beast of Darkness takes over and he ends up hurting Kaska, so he realizes that he needs help. Absolutely brilliantly done. But speaking of him hurting Kaska, fuck me did it hurt to see. This one, well, two really just broke my heart. And well, Guts also. And just after he went through hell to get her back, she now hates him. His luck is just non-existing with her. Miura, give my man a break, please. But it's nice that the group forming is over quickly, yet feels natural compared to what was set up in the former arc. And before we can say anything, the others get to experience a night with two branded people, a quick way to strengthen their bond. And then it's just a beeline to Elfhelm, since that's probably the only place that Kaska is safe. From here on out it becomes a much simpler story. The only complexity is a few stops on the way and then catching up to what Griffith is doing. The multiple moving parts, nuances and depth of the former arcs is downgraded here, and it's a letdown. And every time the group is opposed with an obstacle, you just get impatient and want the story to pick up pace again so we can go to Elfhelm. But it's not like the story isn't gripping. There are great character moments and lordoms happening. It's just a lot of time is spent on what seems to be filler. But most importantly, there is a clear lack of build-up towards a climax. That mixed with the lack of progression makes this a downgrade. It often seems like the story is either going in circles or standing still, and in general it feels like Miura is just spinning his reels while he tries to figure out how to progress the story. I mean, the pirates more than overstays their welcome. I wanted Guts to burn my pages with them on by the end of their involvement. They were fine up until the naval battle, but then they just kept coming back. Just fuck off already. Luckily, it's not all bad. You see, there are indeed build-ups and payoffs in this part of the story, just on a much smaller scale. I have two examples that I want to highlight. The first is regarding the epic and probably most well-known panel of Berserk, the tag team of Zod and Guts. The build-up of this scene is perfection. Just having Guts get brutalized only for Zod to arrive like a boss, going for a failed kill. And then these two fight each other while trying to kill this monster. And the tension of this scene, having them at each other's throats, trying to put through this thunderstorm without falling. I was at the edge of my seat while they were cutting through the sky, only to be met by the greatest payoff. A beautiful execution of epic proportions. This epic image. I know we just finished talking about the art, but just look at this. I wouldn't mind getting this tattooed on me. And then this whole epic human/monster bullet scene ends with Zod being on fire and Guts just being done. My chest hair grew chest hair. The other scene in question is what I call a mini eclipse. You just have this apostle who is the Kushan emperor who needs to ascend once more to battle Griffith. So the man basically dips into his personal wannabe behelit and causes this fake constructed eclipse. And everyone in the city is just stripped for flesh and belonging. And what follows can only be described as Miura putting to the page the equivalent of the Roland Emmerich stare. It's just page after page of people and monsters on this battlefield stopping dead in their tracks and just staring at this thing. We've seen the face, or should I say faces, and we have an idea of the size, but this build-up just continues for pages, setting your imagination into overdrive. Why are they so dumbfounded? What about this creature could possibly surprise us even more? And then you see it, this walking god creature, and there are many more images of this thing that follows, but I'll stop it here. Just know it's some of the greatest panels in Berserk. And this whole scene and what follows, which then ends with the former mentioned Falconia chapter, despite the lacking of build-up and proper climaxes in the second half so far, is a somewhat satisfying conclusion to the arc. It has the best cinematography, dares to do multiple pages or chapters with just the art and no speech bubbles, answers some lurking questions about Griffith's plan, desire and purpose, and leaves the door open for interesting storylines. The only issue for me is how abrupt the arc then concludes, but I understand why the story needed to move on. And even with my gripes towards the arc, I just can't but admire the conclusion here. I've spent a lot of time talking about Berserk at this point, yet I've barely talked about the characters. So let's rectify that. I'll start with the obvious one, my man Guts. There's a stark contrast with the first half, but it only becomes clear once the gang assembles. After the conviction arc, he has become much more gentle. This is both because Kaska is now a constant reminder of what he once was, but also because of what his relationship with her does to him after his low point. And it feels natural to go from the always angry to now more conserved one. He's willing to train Ishidro, befriends Serpico and Fantasia to an extent, and becomes a mentor and guardian for Shrika. It's a light contrast to what came before, but it helps guide the story and make sure Guts doesn't become stale. Now don't get me wrong, I'm a huge God of War fan. I've been so ever since the first game release back in 2005, so I like my big angry murder machine. So I wasn't getting tired of the walking blender cloaked in black. I just appreciate that we get a tad more of the Golden Age Guts. But it also seems that Miura wasn't tired of Guts getting a tiny bit agitated, so there's still plenty of angry moments in this other half. And Miura doesn't hold back with these "fuck yeah" panels of Guts. He's down to create some hurt when the situation calls for it. I'll talk about that in a bit, but even if Guts is indeed more gentle, it also feels like he's become more efficient in removing life around him, or at least make enemies disappear in the red mist. I want to touch on the other members now, so I'll come back to Guts later. The introduction of the gang gives such a great balance between personalities, and it lets Guts interact and express himself in more interesting ways than when he only talked with Puck and a few civilians. And after that first night fighting the demons, the gang felt authentic and formed. You just accept everyone after that, even Fantasia. Her character arc is one of the highlights coming off of the conviction arc. The way she finds a place in protecting Kaska and how they become exceptionally close both before and during Elfhelm. It's truly fulfilling. And Serpico? We'll get back to him. Then Isidro getting trained and then the focus on him actually hurting a human and how that affects him. All these things makes these moments stay with you and you feel part of the gang. And it all culminates in the most touching panels for Guts. He now sees this newfound family like he saw the Band of the Hawk. Those 4 pages hit me hard. Finally, some brevity for this man, and so well deserved. And we don't only focus on Guts and gang, as I mentioned earlier. The fact that we follow Griffith's rise to power is excellent, since we need to hate him more and should feel shame whenever we root for his victories. And to speed things up, Griffith entered the cheat code for God mode, and it's so satisfying to watch. Seeing him ride alone into a siege from the Kushan and just phase through a barrage of arrows like they are throwing feathers at him, just to have him get an army of men to wreak havoc on everyone. And the whole stare down with the Emperor outside of Retranis is peak power display. He is just that guy. Still hit him though. Now things has become a tad light lately, and this focus on the band coming together, Guts being warmer and more open, and the art becoming more cute is making me uneasy. This is Berserk, the most complex, heartbreaking, character-driven story, yet most metal visual tale ever depicted. Someone, please put Berserker back in Berserk. This is what I'm talking about. The visual depiction of Guts raising darkness, devouring him, and then going fucking apeshit on the closest unlucky blood bag, which needs to be popped ASAP. And oh boy, is it a sight to behold. The art gets metal as shit, the voracious fighting style mutilating enemies, the explosion of pure animalistic anger and force, the scratchy metal darkness covering the pages, and the precise details accompanying the Berserker armor. Everything is pure awesomeness, even if the toll on Guts is immense. And to top it off, he even gets to do it as a dog. A fucking dog. The only issue is that the dark panels with symbolism depicting Guts' psychic state and how he forces himself to behave a certain way to continue his journey are now reserved only for the Berserker armor. This is an unfortunate downgrade, since the armor is used sparingly, thus robbing Guts of his normal complexity and symbolism. It's still there, but not as frequent. Still, even if it pains me when he activates the armor, it still puts a smile on me, because I know the most dynamic action paneling and choreography is about to shower me in all its glory. And all this creativity doesn't stop there. We might have been introduced to the demonic and unnatural darkness since the very first chapter. But in the second part, we are introduced to Muir's take on magic. Now, I'm not that well versed in fantasy, so my encounter with magic systems is limited, but the way he implements it is truly unique. Instead of going the easy route of either creating spells like you're in Fairy Tail or Final Fantasy, or you bend and manipulate the elements like a bender from Avatar, he chooses to go a more archaic and ancient route. Here you, in simple terms, ask old spirits to give a hand, and then scary shit happens. There's this natural law feel to it, be it using hair as a conduit, traveling the astral plane for spirits, or making the flood an extension of yourself. He just makes it have this feeling of an old forest with a damp atmosphere that just have a presence of authority that is hard to describe. If you've adventured into such a forest as a child, you know that feeling. And the creative output it gives Muir is especially the astral diving. Just the scene with Fantasia on the ship alone had this great sense of freedom. You feel weightless just by looking at it. And even if this magic system is rather simple, it's still great to have it introduced by a master like Shirke. And even as a late addition to the gang, she quickly fits in after their first mission. And she keeps magic relevant in different manners than with apostles or fantastical beings. It brings clarity and understanding to some of the more frightening aspects of both the astral plane and the spirits within it. And she is still depicted as a young preteen, naive look on the world and the harsh reality it brings. And that conflict is often held by Guts. This scene on the beach is one of my favorites that shows his softer side. Him genuinely comforting her. Guts of all people, who usually deals it with emotions by smacking it with a 2-meter long sword, knows how to comfort a grieving child. Character development, and you love to see it. And it later leads to my other favorite scene with her, at the end. When I saw her in those normal clothes, I knew that I would murder for her. Protect Shike at all costs. So I was glad the Guts felt the same and started remodeling people's faces after disrespecting her. It's these small moments between the group which makes them feel like the Band of the Hawk, but also makes you feel like you are part of it. Which leaves us with the crux of the downgrade, is what people point to and also where I felt it the most. Fantasia. It's still ongoing, but the matter of fact is that this is where Guts and Griffith's story gets uncreative. And we just got trailer park versions of Pirates for the past eternity. It's also where digital art starts to showing its ugly head. But before I lay down my issues with this part, let me at least praise Elfhelm itself. It is depicted as a morph between the physical world and the astral plane, and it is never boring to either look at or explore. Muir really gets a chance to be creative in making a magical island that seeps legends of old creatures from stories told around a fire. Even with the world being Fantasia now and Falconia coming into reality, Elfhelm managed to stand out, and for that, props. However, it does not distract from the many issues of the Fantasia arc. First off, there is no real stakes anymore. It fits with the theme of safe haven that Elfhelm provides, but in contrast to the story before, it is lackluster and at times boring. Sure, the dreamscape have some stakes, but that face in comparison to the insight you as a reader gets of Kaska's psyche. The only real stake is with Rickard, and even then only in a brief escape scene. And it was mostly great because I was starving for some antagonistic forces against our heroes. And when you are more invested in Rickard than freaking Guts and gang, then something has gone a little wrong in the story writing. Guts' character also takes a backseat here, with him mostly waiting around for the plot to happen and not having any real goal in mind. This is less of an issue since that is his conflict here, but it's still simplifying him too much, as to say Guts is shallow without his lust for revenge. It's a dramatic oversimplification, but I hope it gets my point across. The multi-layered Guts, who is always in battle with himself over what he feels and what he thinks he should feel to accomplish his goals and more, is not really here. It's not terrible, just compared to normal Berserk standards, it's not that good. So what do you do when Guts is lacking his complexity? You go back to the Golden Age arc. No, not opening the volumes and start reading them. No, that is too easy. No, you make a sudden flashback to young Guts, back when he was, in my eyes, most complex and interesting. And I love what Miura does here. Not only do we see lost but angry at the world pre-Griffith's Guts, but we get a link to Elfham as well. The way we spend quiet moments with him and the elf, having Guts learning to trust again right after being betrayed again, like he's gunning for an achievement. And the seeds that planted for him not just finding solace and safety with the Band of the Hawk, but with the gang as well, is excellent. And even if the ending was predictable, it still hit hard because of Guts' reaction. Masterfully done. You know, this is too much feels and I want to save that for later, so let's talk about teeth. Now, this is not me fixating on Miura's dental knowledge. I just like when Guts needs to dig extra deep. Miura always emphasizes Guts gritting his teeth just before he swings or pushes through. Once you see it, you notice it a lot, but it gives gravity to the moment. Like Guts saying, this is tough and I'm at my limit, but there's no way around it. Fantastic detail, and luckily used sparingly. That said, there is one instance where the teeth grinding is so severe I thought his teeth would shatter, and it preludes the hardest swing by Guts in the entire manga. He needs to make sushi of the snail monsters, grit his teeth hard, and does this swing. Man swung so hard, not gonna lie, I thought I was going to get cut in half. The sheer fucking force in that swing, and it just demolished the opposition. Even I felt it. Epic. But we can't have too much epic in Berserk. We already covered that. We need to bring the dark aspects back a bit. We need the story to be twisted and cruel again. Who wants to be happy reading Berserk? We come here to hate ourselves. So, luckily, we still need to talk about Serpico, my man and brother in arms. He made a huge impression in the first half of the story, and I specifically highlighted his fight with Guts on the cliffside. Now, luckily we get a round 2, but long before that we get a flashback I never saw coming. This backstory of how Fantasia and Serpico met and why Serpico goes above and beyond for her, how they connected and their tragic upbringing, the tenderness between them and their true relation, and then it's topped off with that burning scene. Are you drawing something fun, Miura? Well, you know, just a man forced to burn his own sick mother at the stake. Good fun. I had legit forgot how dark and twisted Berserk is outside of the eclipse. I needed to reread Goodnight Punpun afterwards, just to cheer up. But the layers Serpico gets, not only from the flashback, but his time spent with the gang, is just excellent. The way he lightens up and becomes more of a person rather than Farnese's tool is a much welcome change. Which brings us to the fight. It's not sincere, but it still has the respect for the agreement. A proper challenge, no holding back. Go for the kill. Or what Guts calls a normal disagreement. And again, the tactical implementation from Serpico are perfectly done, and this is one of the best sword fights in the manga. It is one of the few that shows that Guts is a master swordsman, not just a strong man with a sword. I won't show too much of it. Sure, I have already spoiled most of the latter half of the story, but I have my limits, and this fight is too beautiful. I want more of this in Berserk, especially from Guts. But in general, I just want more Berserk. This story has gripped me like I never thought possible, which is why it's fitting that after reading Miura's manuscript, his Berserk, from start to finish, the deluxe editions round it all off with the official guidebook. And what a great way to end it all. You get information on the gang that you might have missed on your first read, thoughts Miura had on the characters, world and plot, and a great interview with him going over the first 3 major parts of the story up until just before the Fantasia arc. All this made you feel like you got to know him better, like a friend telling you his life story before leaving your life. A final moment with the author of arguably the greatest story ever told. but not finished. A fitting ending to his Berserk, his version of it, at least what he managed to tell. Which brings me to the end of his story. And to talk about it, I'll circle back to the core of the story of Kaska and Guts. The emotional heart of it all, and just the sheer bad luck he has with her. The way he gives into his darkest desires in a moment of exhaustion and weakness, and the heartbreak afterwards with how Kaska fears him, the woman he loves, and his sole connection to humanity, his own relation to love and kindness. And it just keeps getting worse, yet he still throws himself into danger to keep her safe, and then smiles beaten and broken to her, even if he only gets a snare back. This complex relationship is fantastic and tragically done. And after what feels like an eternity, a purgatory, we get to Elfhelm, and we dive into the dreamscape. And everything that transpires in there is disturbing but captivating. We even get symbolism and explanation for said symbolism. A take away from Miura to tell us what things mean and make it make sense in universe. I even felt nostalgic going down memory lane whenever they collected fragments of Kaska's mind, seeing the golden age from her perspective. This final hurrah to the brief levity before the dreaded eclipse, and then Kaska wakes up and have this sweet scene with Fantasia and Shaika. And then we get to the panel that hit me the hardest. And Berserk has a lot of hard-hitting moments, be it for good and bad reasons. But this one is different. Last video I talked about how this image made me pause because of context and the uses of negative space. Well, here it's all about the narrative context. Fantasia asks Kaska if she remembers Guts, and with how long she was in that broken state, with the mental blockage of the eclipse, and with the possibility of her remembering what Guts briefly did to her, I was holding my breath. Were we about to see Guts lose Kaska for good? Would he never catch a break? And with my heart racing and holding my breath, I turn the page scared of what might be coming. And then I see this. This subtle but pure reaction from her hit me like a truck full of love. I fucking cried with Kaska here. Cathartic much? After all we went through and we are finally here, a big sigh of relief. But since this is Berserk and we can have fun things, it's immediately ripped away, because Miura still hates us. But I do like how we are still not getting the happy ending, since it would end Guts' journey. And it makes sense with Kaska's trauma, but it doesn't make it less hurtful. And speaking of hurtful, let's talk about the looming shadow over my two videos. I brought it up briefly in the other one. Let's talk about the ending that Miura drew before he passed away. The final chapter, chapter 364 that Miura drew, was by a miracle a fitting ending to the series. After all the struggles and battles that Kaska and Guts has been through on their long journey since the Golden Age, we get this final chapter where they get a chance to be a family with essentially their child. Kaska unknowingly acting as a mother, doing chores and having normal family moments. Guts training Owen to get playful moments with the Moonlight Child in his armor, something they both feel attached to on a deeper level. Kaska hugging him in her sleep while Guts reminisce under the stars the quiet life they now have, wondering if he should just let go of revenge and be happy. And then the ending with the truth revealed of the child's identity, explaining the incident at the Hill of the Source, and a tearful Griffiths looking at both Guts and Kaska. This image echoing a godlike being mourning the passing of his creator. Sure, there are a lot of plot points left open about the God Hand, Skull Knight, Cushion Pushback, Griffith's plan and fate, and so much more. But as open-ended as it is, this is still a great ending. How abrupt it may be, we end on a happier note, and after everything, that's enough. Even if this is not the ending he planned, it still suffices considering the circumstances. And if you only want to experience the Berserk that Miura wanted, then the 14 deluxe editions or the 41 singles has just that. His chapters, his story, his Berserk, and the not planned ending that he drew. And what a masterpiece it is. But it doesn't have to be the end. If you can allow the story to continue without him, if you can allow his best friend for over 30 years who he told and sparred the entire story with, including themes and the planned ending, Koji Mori, and his team through many years, who he trained to copy his art style, Studio Gaga. For them to continue and finish the story without adding new lore or characters other than what Miura told and wrote them. If you could allow what's essentially the closest to the man himself, and is basically the only team that can fulfill the task, and they have the entire blueprint, then you can get the proper ending in time. And I have heard fans not liking it without its creator, which I can respect, but there are also many who, like me, wants the story to finish, to give it an ending, a proper one, to let Guts and gang find peace, and for Griffiths to suffer a fitting end. It took some chapters, but we are finally there. The art, pacing and storytelling is a solid 9 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it's more than sufficient. Miura was 10 out of 10 on a bad day, and even higher on his bests. You can't get on his level, but you can get close enough, and that is good enough for me. Berserk will go down in history as one of the most important and well-crafted stories ever. It started out fine, but then it evolved into something greater than itself. Through passion, obsession, and the desire to tell a good story, we got something magical. A dark fantasy that, despite being grand, fantastical, gut-filled, and too big to comprehend, is a grounded story about finding your home, be it people, a castle, or purpose. It does subtext, symbolism, psychology, build-up, payoff, structure, architecture, themes, fucking boats, and more perfectly, yet make it seem effortless. It's one of the greatest stories that I have ever read, and my only regret is that it took the passing of its author for me to start. This might have been the first time that I've ever read all of Berserk, but it definitely won't be the last time. I cannot wait on picking up on new things on my next go-around. I can only bow my head and thank you, Kentaro Miura, for gifting us this magical story and sharing your passion with the world and characters that you created. You died doing what you wanted, no matter what. And I bet you are happy. May you rest in peace. Berserk. I guess you have read it, because, considering all my spoilers at this point. But do you agree with my statements, or do you disagree, be it the first video or this one? Whatever you think, comment below and let me read the thoughts. And until I see you in the next video, remember to stay awesome. Thank you for watching.